It begins with a man in the desert, alone, no phone, no map, no water. He's been walking for days. His skin is cracked, his lips dry, his vision blurring. He collapses beneath a jagged rock formation, delirious. That's when he sees her. Not a mirage, not a hallucination, but something ancient. A woman made of shadow and fire. She doesn't speak, but her presence is overwhelming. She kneels beside him and touches his forehead. And in that moment, a memory unlocks. Not his memory, humanity's memory. Of a time when masculine and feminine energy weren't at war, but in harmony. This isn't a love story. It's a psychological initiation. And it's what Carl Jung spent his entire life trying to explain. The truth about masculine and feminine energy. Not gender, not roles, but archetypes, forces, energies that live inside all of us. And here's the shocking truth. If you don't understand them, if you don't integrate them, you will stay stuck in a half-life, disconnected, disempowered, divided against yourself. But when you do understand, everything changes.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
We live in a world obsessed with extremes, masculine versus feminine, logic versus emotion, strength versus sensitivity. Society teaches us to pick a side, to identify with one and suppress the other. But Jung saw something radically different. He saw that every human being, regardless of gender, carries both energies within. The masculine, what he called the logos, is the principle of order, structure, focus, reason, and direction. The feminine, the eros, is the principle of connection, intuition, nurturing, chaos, and feeling. These aren't just traits, they are cosmic forces. And the goal of psychological development is not to become more masculine or more feminine, but to become whole, and to integrate both, to allow the dance between them to unfold inside you. Because when you suppress one, you distort the other. And most people are doing exactly that, living from a distorted masculine or a wounded feminine, and they don't even know it. And think about it. How many men have been taught to reject the feminine within themselves, to suppress emotions, to avoid vulnerability, to dominate rather than connect? And how many women have been taught to disconnect from the masculine, to fear assertiveness, to equate structure with control, and to resent logic as cold and unfeeling? But here's the uncomfortable truth. When we reject these energies inside ourselves, we project them onto others. We create false enemies. Men fear women's intuition. Women resent men's decisiveness. And relationships become battlegrounds instead of sacred mirrors. This is not just a cultural issue, but it's a psychological wound. And Jung gave us the tools to heal it. He called them the anima and the animus. The anima is the inner feminine in a man. The animus is the inner masculine in a woman. They are not ideas. They are living energies in the unconscious. And they shape how we relate to ourselves, to others, and to the world. When a man rejects his anima, he becomes rigid, emotionally stunted, driven by conquest but devoid of connection. When a woman rejects her animus, she becomes passive, indecisive, overwhelmed by emotion without direction. But when a man integrates his anima, he gains access to his intuition, his creativity, his capacity for love and inner depth. When a woman integrates her animus, she accesses her ability to act, to speak truth, to move with clarity and power. This integration is not about becoming more like the opposite sex. It's about becoming more like yourself. Because your true self is not one or the other. It is the union of both. This is the real meaning of alchemy. Not turning lead into gold, but transforming the divided psyche into a unified self. Jung called it the conjunctio, the sacred marriage of masculine and feminine within. And it is the key to your evolution. Not just spiritually, but practically, because these energies govern everything. Your career, your relationships, your creativity, your inner peace. When they're out of balance, your life feels chaotic, confusing, or stagnant. When they're integrated, your life begins to flow. You make decisions with clarity and compassion. You pursue goals with intensity and presence. You speak truth and stay open to mystery. You don't need to control everything, but you're not lost in chaos either. You become grounded and fluid, focused and receptive, structured and intuitive. And that's when real power emerges, not the power to dominate, but the power to create. But here's the challenge. The anima and animus don't integrate themselves. They resist, they fight, they sabotage, because they live in the unconscious. They've been distorted by culture, by trauma, by history. For most men, the anima appears first in dreams or projections as a mysterious woman, seductive, powerful, often dangerous. She shows up in relationships, in fantasies, in fear. She is not just a symbol. She is a guide, but only if he recognizes her as part of himself, not an external figure to possess or run from. Likewise, the animus in a woman often appears as a critical voice. Harsh, demanding, rigid. It tells her she's not enough, that she should do more, achieve more, prove more. But that voice, when integrated, becomes her inner strength, her clarity, her action in the world. This is the work, to face the inner figures, to dialogue with them, to understand their wounds, to reclaim their gifts. And most people never do it. They project instead. They blame others. They get trapped in loops of conflict, addiction, dissatisfaction. But the real battle is not out there. It's within. So ask yourself, what energy have you been rejecting? Have you been over-identifying with structure, control, and logic at the cost of your intuition, your feeling, your capacity for surrender? Or have you been lost in emotion, indecision, and chaos, avoiding the strength, discipline, and clarity that the inner masculine brings? What would your life look like if you allowed both energies to speak, to guide, to dance? Because here's what happens when you do. You begin to feel whole, not perfect, not always balanced, but alive. You stop outsourcing your power. You stop chasing completion in other people. You stop creating drama just to feel energy. You no longer look for someone to save you or someone to submit to. You become your own savior, your own guide, your own beloved. And from that place, you relate to others differently. You don't need them to complete you. You invite them to meet you, to co-create, to mirror, to dance. That kind of relationship is rare, but it's real, and it begins with the integration of these inner forces. And don't think this is abstract. This is deeply practical. Masculine and feminine energy operate at every level. The masculine decides, makes boundaries, holds space. The feminine feels, surrenders, nourishes. Every moment of your life, you are embodying one or the other or both. When you set a goal and move toward it with focus, that's masculine energy. When you listen deeply to your body, your emotions, your intuition, that's feminine. When you build a structure, that's masculine. When you allow something to emerge through you, that's feminine. The magic happens when you combine them. When the masculine creates the container and the feminine fills it with life. When the feminine inspires and the masculine acts. That's real power. That's creative genius. That's soul embodiment. And that's what Jung meant when he said that the self is androgynous. Not in the political or social sense, but in the archetypal sense. The self is the union of opposites, the reconciliation of polarities, the integration of masculine and feminine. And only 1% of people ever truly understand this, not because it's hidden, but because it requires the courage to look inward and to confront the inner war, to stop blaming the world and begin healing the psyche. So the question is, are you willing to do that? Are you willing to meet your inner feminine not as weakness, but as wisdom? Are you willing to meet your inner masculine not as domination, but as direction? Are you willing to stop living a fragmented life and start becoming whole? Once you say yes to this inner integration, the journey begins in earnest, but not in the way you might expect. It doesn't start with a grand awakening or a perfect spiritual practice, but it starts with disruption, with discomfort, with the slow unraveling of the false identity you've spent years or even decades building. Because the persona, the mask you wear for the world, is built on imbalance. It's constructed to fit in, to be accepted, to be praised, but not to be whole. And the moment you begin integrating your inner masculine and feminine, the persona begins to crack. You might feel lost. You might feel pulled in opposite directions. You might begin questioning everything: your values, your relationships, your purpose. But that's not a crisis. That's a sign that your soul is finally waking up. Carl Jung understood that the psyche wants wholeness more than happiness. It will sacrifice comfort to push you toward integration. That's why the anima and animus don't come in gently. They arrive in dreams, in projections, in emotional upheavals. They show up in your triggers, in your obsessions, in your longings. If you don't face them consciously, they run your life from the shadows. You end up chasing partners not because you love them, but because they mirror the part of yourself you've disowned. You end up drawn to chaotic relationships, addictive patterns, or power struggles, not because you're broken, but because the unconscious is trying to get your attention. Every projection is an invitation. Every emotional storm is a signal. The question is, are you listening? To listen, you have to slow down. You have to create space for the unconscious to speak. That means solitude, silence, shadow work. It means paying attention to your dreams, your fantasies, your emotional reactions. It means asking yourself, what part of me is trying to speak right now? When you feel jealous, what's the unmet need beneath it? When you feel rage, what boundary has been crossed, or what power are you afraid to claim? When you feel deep attraction to someone, what archetype are they activating in you? This is not about judgment. It's about curiosity. Because every emotion, every reaction, every projection is a portal to deeper self-knowledge. And through this process, something incredible happens. The anima and animus begin to evolve. In the beginning, they appear in distorted forms. The anima might be seductive, manipulative, chaotic, but the animus might be critical, controlling, rigid. These are not their true forms. These are the masks they wear when they've been repressed, ignored, misunderstood. But as you work with them, as you dialogue with them, integrate their lessons, and honor their presence, they begin to transform. The anima becomes the muse, the source of intuition, creativity, relational wisdom. The animus becomes the inner guide, the voice of clarity, strength, and purpose. They stop sabotaging you and start empowering you. They stop pulling you into projection and start guiding you toward integration. This inner union begins to reshape your outer life. You start making decisions not from fear or ego, but from alignment. You stop needing validation because you are already connected to your own inner authority. You stop chasing love because you are already in relationship with your own soul. You stop seeking power over others because you've found the power within. This is not abstract. This is transformation at the deepest level. You begin to notice subtle shifts. You speak differently. You move differently. You relate differently. You're less reactive, more responsive. Less rigid, more fluid. Less performative, more present. And people notice. They feel the energy around you shift. Some will be drawn to it. Others will be threatened by it. Because when you embody wholeness, you disrupt the collective illusion of separation. And this embodiment is not a one-time event. It's a lifelong practice. The dance between the masculine and feminine never ends. There will be days when you feel unbalanced, when one energy dominates, when old patterns resurface. That's not failure. That's the nature of the psyche. It moves in spirals, not straight lines. Integration is not perfection. It's presence. It's the willingness to keep showing up for yourself, again and again, even when it's messy, even when it's hard. It's the courage to hold paradox, the ability to be both strong and soft, focused and open, grounded and fluid. That's the real power. Not dominance, not control, but the ability to hold complexity without fragmenting. Jung often spoke of the transcendent function, the psychic mechanism that allows opposites to come together and create something new. That's what happens when you integrate masculine and feminine energy. You don't just balance them, you transcend them. You create a third force, a higher consciousness that can hold both and operate from a place beyond duality. This is the birth of the self, not the ego, not the persona, but the deep, archetypal self that is rooted in wholeness. And when you live from that self, you no longer need to control the world. You participate in it, you dance with it, you co-create with it. And that's when life begins to feel meaningful again. Not because everything is easy, but because everything is connected. You begin to see the symbolic nature of reality. You notice synchronicities. You feel guided. You trust your intuition. You act with clarity. You receive with gratitude. You give without depletion. You become the meeting point of heaven and an earth, of spirit and matter, of masculine and feminine. Not as an idea, but as a lived reality. And that reality changes everything. It elevates your work, your relationships, your creativity, your presence. You become a lighthouse for others, not because you have all the answers, but because you are living the question. And this is the deepest truth Jung gave us, that the psyche is not broken, it is unfinished. That our wounds are not flaws, but doorways. That our suffering is not punishment, but initiation. And that the union of masculine and feminine within us is not a luxury, it is a necessity. Without it, we stay stuck in projection, in conflict, in fragmentation. With it, we begin to heal, to remember, to return. So let me ask you, what would it mean to stop identifying with one half of your soul? What would it mean to stop suppressing the energy that scares you because it's unfamiliar? What would it mean to become whole not in theory, but in truth? Because that's what's possible. That's what's waiting. Not outside you, not in someone else, but within. The anima, the animus, the sacred marriage, the conjunctio, and the self. Now we arrive where most never dare to go, not because it's hidden, but because it demands everything. The final threshold. The moment where theory must become embodiment, where inner understanding must be translated into outer life. This is where most turn back. They've glimpsed the inner masculine or feminine, maybe even dialogued with those energies in dreams or through introspection, but when life begins to demand that they live from integration, fear returns. Because the ego knows it's no longer in charge. The ego, built on separation and control, cannot survive the wholeness of the self, and so it resists. It tempts us back into old roles, familiar dynamics, predictable pain. But once you've begun this journey, the only way forward is through discomfort, through unlearning, through a radical reimagining of who you are and what it means to be alive. Carl Jung didn't promise comfort. He promised meaning. And meaning is born when we stop running from the unknown and instead choose to participate in it. Masculine and feminine energy, when truly integrated, don't make life simpler. They make it richer. Suddenly, your inner world becomes a dialogue. Every choice becomes a sacred negotiation between structure and spontaneity, between clarity and compassion, between action and surrender. You no longer seek balance as a static state. You learn to dance with imbalance, to move with it, to adjust moment by moment, breath by breath. And that's when you discover the real gift of this work, not just inner peace, but inner sovereignty. You become the author of your energy, the master of your presence. You no longer outsource your decisions to conditioning, to trauma, to projections. You choose, you create, you respond. And this response is not mechanical. It's alive, it's intuitive, it's precise. Because you've trained yourself to listen not just to your thoughts, but to the deeper layers of the psyche. Masculine energy whispers, hold the line, speak the truth, protect the sacred. Feminine energy murmurs, feel the truth, trust the flow, open to the mystery. One without the other leads to distortion. Masculine without feminine becomes tyranny, rigid, controlling, disconnected. Feminine without masculine becomes chaos, uncontained, unfocused, overwhelmed. But together, they form the vessel and the river, and the tree and the wind, the temple and the fire within it. You are no longer at war with yourself. You are in communion. This communion changes your relationships. You stop projecting your inner imbalance onto others. You no longer expect a partner to complete you, you invite them to meet you. You no longer confuse intensity with intimacy. That you know the difference between chemistry that triggers your wounds and connection that nourishes your soul. You stop attracting dynamics that mirror your inner fragmentation. You start magnetizing relationships that reflect your integration. And even when conflict arises, you face it differently. You don't collapse. You don't attack. You stay present. You hold space. You listen with both the sword and the chalice, with clarity and empathy, with truth and tenderness. That's not weakness, that's mastery. And mastery extends beyond relationships. It touches every aspect of your life. Your work becomes an extension of your inner truth. You stop chasing success as a substitute for self-worth. You create from abundance, not lack, and from inspiration, not obligation. You stop grinding against life and start collaborating with it. The inner masculine sets the intention, builds the structure, follows through. The inner feminine receives the vision, tunes into the moment, births the idea. Together, they make you unstoppable, not in the way the world defines power, but in the way the soul recognizes alignment. You begin to live in flow, but not passive flow. Directed flow. Flow with purpose, with presence, with power. But none of this can happen if you're still rejecting part of yourself. If you still believe that emotion is weakness, if you still fear assertiveness, if you still judge one energy as superior, safer, or more spiritual. But integration requires humility. It requires the willingness to be wrong about yourself, and to question the identity you've built, to make space for what you've pushed away. And that's where the real transformation lies, in the willingness to feel what you've avoided, to see what you've denied, to honor what you've dismissed. The anima and the animus are not enemies. They are guides, allies, sacred messengers from the soul. And when you stop fighting them, when you stop projecting them onto others, they reveal their true nature, not as chaos or control, but as love. Yes, love, not sentimental love, not romantic fantasy, but archetypal love. The love that arises when the psyche begins to remember itself. When the war ends and the dance begins, this is the sacred marriage. Not just within individuals, but within cultures, within humanity. Because what we do not integrate personally, we repeat collectively. The wars we see outside us are reflections of the wars we wage inside. The divided world is a mirror of the divided psyche. But when we do this work, when we integrate the masculine and feminine within, we become agents of healing. We carry a different frequency. We speak a different language, not of dominance or submission, but of unity and of wholeness, of truth. And that truth is not static. It evolves, it expands. Every layer of integration reveals a new layer of depth. The more you embody both energies, the more you see how they manifest in subtle ways, in how you eat, in how you walk, in how you breathe, in how you speak to yourself when no one is listening. And the work never ends, but it becomes sacred. It becomes joyful. You begin to love the process, to trust the unfolding, to meet each moment as an opportunity for deeper embodiment. And one day, without realizing it, you look around and realize that your life feels different. Not because everything is perfect, but because you are present. You are whole. You've stopped waiting for someone or something to come fix you. You've stopped needing to prove or perform. But you've stopped living from reaction and started living from soul. That's what happens when you embody Jung's deepest insight, that the masculine and feminine are not enemies, but lovers. Not opposites, but complements. Not external roles, but internal realities. And when they are united within you, you become unstoppable, not because you dominate the world, but because you are no longer divided within yourself. So I leave you with this, not as a conclusion, but as an invitation. What part of you have you abandoned in order to survive? What energy have you judged, feared, or suppressed in the name of being good, strong, successful, or accepted? What would it mean to reclaim that energy, not to wield it over others, but to integrate it within yourself? What would it mean to live from wholeness, not performance, and from presence, not persona, from truth, not trauma? Because that's the path, that's the work, that's the gift that only 1% understand. But if you've come this far, maybe you're ready to become part of that 1%. But maybe you're ready to stop playing a role and start living a reality. Maybe you're ready to embody the full spectrum of who you are, masculine and feminine, light and shadow, earth and sky, form and flame. Maybe you're ready to become whole. And if you are, the journey has already begun.